Paul Johnson here for Film Obsessive. Today I am with Victor Fraga. Victor is director of the documentary The Bad Patriots. It features the British filmmaker Ken Loach and politician Jeremy Corbyn. It's been playing in special screenings and events in and around London and the UK, and it was also selected for a special screening at BFI South Bank in London. Victor, welcome.
Hello, Paul. How are you? It's a real pleasure to be here.
I'm just fine this morning. Victor, let me have you take a minute, if you will, to introduce the film to our viewers and readers who've yet to see it.
Yeah, I am a British Brazilian filmmaker. I was born in Brazil, was raised in Brazil, and I've lived all of my adult life in the UK. A few years ago, I made a film about media manipulation in Brazil. It's called The Coup d'etat Factory. I did reasonably well, usual festivals, streaming, blah, blah, blah. And then I decided to do a similar film in the UK. So investigate media manipulation, bias, censorship in the UK. And in order to do that, I got together with Ken Loach. Ken Loach is the father of social realism, has been making films for 60 years, the only British person to win the Palme d'Or twice, the person to have had most films in Cannes in history, 15 films in Cannes. So the voice of the working class. And Jeremy Corbyn, who is the former leader of the Labour Party, nearly twice he nearly became Prime Minister of the UK. And because of his genuine left-wing credentials, he's a socialist. He is very much hated by the media. So both Ken Loach and Jeremy Corbyn have been consistently described as anti-patriotic, as terrorist sympathizers, as well, anti-Semitic. That's a very recurring one right now for reasons we all know. Spineless, so you name it. So they're dismissed, they're erased, they're cancelled, despite their decades. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn is the longest serving member of parliament in the UK for 40 years. Uh, and Ken Loach has been making films for 60 years. So for 71 minutes, I talked to them about the tricks that the media plays on them. Ken Loach talks about how the establishment has consistently attempted to censor his work, sometimes very overtly, sometimes with more subtle manners, simply saying, "Ooh, this isn't commercial enough. No one wants to see this," blah, blah, blah. And Jeremy uh, has been having paparazzi following him and people making things up, picking on things like, "Oh, your bike is red, it's Chinese," and "Oh, your hat looks like," and the BBC did that. They doctored his hat to make it look like a Russian hat. So they've got a long history of media bias and manipulation. Um, my film premiered in the São Paulo Film Festival in Brazil because I draw a lot of comparisons with Brazil because I'm Brazilian. Then it premiered in the UK. I have to say, my film has been the victim of two very vicious censorship attacks. I can't go into the details for ethical reasons. Interestingly, my film in Brazil, The Coup d'etat Factory, didn't suffer any retaliation whatsoever. And now this very small film, very simple film in the UK, which is basically, again, me in conversations with Ken and Jeremy. There's a lot of clips from Ken's films, pictures from their lives, along with the things they said. But it's a very simple, small film. It's been it's been suffering some vicious attacks. Even there's a screening tomorrow in a cinema in London, and the exhibitor contacted me to say that the platforms would not promote the film. That Facebook, Instagram, and even Eventbrite would say that that went against their guidelines because it could interfere with elections. Eh?
I'm I'm
There's no
stunned to
impending
hear
election
that.
in
I
the
mean, your
UK.
your film is all about media manipulation, but it really is about the major mainstream legacy media in Britain. But from what I'm hearing, it sounds like what you're suggesting there is that social media platforms are equally, if not more so, responsible in that kind of activity?
Yep, absolutely. And what's happening to the film, these two attacks, and these two very overt attacks, which I had to confront and very with my head up, and these more subtle attacks, censorship attacks of Facebook and Instagram, and Eventbrite refusing to circulate it amongst their readership, like the 10,000 subscribers that my exhibitor has for claiming that it's political. Uh, yeah, that's all an extension of what the story the film is telling. So
It is. I mean, and that's
it's all
exactly
part
the
of the
same
film
kind of thing.
narrative. Yeah,
Same kind
yeah.
of thing that Loach has suffered really at various points throughout his career, and a different way that Corbyn has as well. You know, both of your subjects, if I can just turn the direction a little bit, so passionate, so knowledgeable, so articulate. I just want to ask how you came to connect with each of them to the point where they're as comfortable as they both clearly are with you as an interviewer and willing to make this film together with you.
Well, I met Jeremy Corbyn years ago when I did my film, The Coup d'etat Factory, about media bias in Brazil. Corbyn and I did several screenings of my previous film. Corbyn is very connected to Latin America. He had three children with a Chilean woman, and he's married to a Mexican woman, Laura. She's wonderful. And so we became very close, and he could relate to what was happening in Brazil when they got rid of Dilma, a parliamentary coup, or what we call a white coup, and then they put Lula in prison so that he wouldn't get elected. But then we got Bolsonaro. Well, anyway, so Corbyn related to what was happening in Brazil, and we did like 4 or 5 screenings together, loads of debates, and we said, why don't we invite Ken for a conversation? I had interviewed Ken 3 times in the past, and Ken had considered doing a film about Corbyn as well in the past. So when both myself and Corbyn approached Ken together, he was very inclined to say yes. We spent the whole day together, so it's about 6 hours of footage. It cut down to 71 minutes. You see at the end they're really exhausted because I mean, Ken is 89. He was 87 at the time. It's no spring chicken. Um, so they were exhausted at the end. But also prior to that, I met with them and I said, I want to pick your brains. Well, I want you to pick your own brains and dig out instances in the past, some really meaningful instances in the past where the media has clearly attempted to silence, boycott, or paint you as a very unsavory figure. So yeah, yeah, we were very comfortable. We did this in a studio in South London called Sen Studios, who share our values and principles. So yeah, they were very much, they were feeling very comfortable. And it is the only time Jeremy and Ken have been filmed together for a very extensive period of time. So no one else has done that before. So if yeah, I certainly feel privileged. I'm a Brazilian-born filmmaker based in the UK. It demonstrates that these problems aren't universal. And I'll tell you from my experience making a film in Brazil and another one in the UK. Contrary to general belief, the UK is a lot more regressive and censorious than Brazil. No retaliation in Brazil. And if I told you what I've been through in the UK with such a small film, you'd be shocked. I mean, the festivals don't really like looking at it. The film festivals like films which are vaguely political, which can be labeled as anti-fascist, as subversive, but something that's overtly political is normally frowned upon. So I'm also a journalist. I have a good relationship with all of the festivals. I love all of them, all of the big festivals in Europe. I go to all of them. I'm traveling 40% of the year. Um, and they would, nevertheless, they wouldn't pick my film, and some of them didn't like it. It's fair enough, but I would argue there's also an element of self-censorship. Festivals don't want you to go there. The film is also wraps up with a message about the weaponization of anti-Semitism, which and you probably heard of the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, which was created in the US in order to silence criticism of Israel. It has been implemented by the Labour Party, has been implemented by the UK government, and people are concerned that it could be implemented in the education system and in the media. And it basically says that describing Israel as racist is racist. It conflates Zionism with Judaism and shields Israel from any sort of criticism whatsoever. And my film talks about that, and obviously that's a message that's not welcome. It's a no-go, and I knew that.
You're playing on the very notion of the quote bad patriots, and in promotional materials you're subtly suggesting that Corbyn and Loach are the bad patriots, but in reality you're claiming they're not. Who are?
Yeah, well, the bad patriots are the pseudo patriots, the people who the tub thumping nationalists, the ones who want the blue passports. So Brexit, when we had Brexit, there was a lot of discussion about around the passports. We want our blue passports back. We want to take control. So it's the loud rhetoric, which doesn't mean anything in Jeremy describes it very well, what it means to be a patriot. A patriot means caring about your neighbor, caring about the most marginalized, making sure that people have enough to eat, making sure that no one is homeless, people are getting a good health service, the people are getting good education. That's patriotism. That's not a flag. It's not a flag shagging. It's not the color of your passports. But obviously, the far right, which is almost synonymous with the right now, the more moderate right has dissipated, has kind of vanished into thin air. And even the so-called left, I mean, Keir Starmer has come up with a speech that talking about all the damage that immigrants have done to this country, which has been compared to a horrific speech from the 80s called Rivers of Blood. So Labour is not really left-wing anymore. Uh, Tory is far right, I would say, and there's a new party, Reform, which is likely to win the next elections, but it's barely distinguishable from the Tories right now. But they have become far right, and it's the tub-thumping nationalism. They promote an idea that the British are tacitly superior, that foreigners are coming here to take our jobs, that socialists are intrinsically bad people, and that there's an enemy out there that needs to be confronted at all costs. The far right thrives on imaginary enemies. Think from Hitler, Mussolini, anyone you can think. Right now, obviously, the enemies are number one enemies are the Muslims. So there's widespread Islamophobia coming from the right, coming from the far right, and also, to some extent, from the left. So,
You know, it's almost as if you've just paraphrased our own president's Memorial Day message to the American people, which was, you know, practically full of a similar kind of invective and fomenting of hatred against the quote other with a capital O. And that, you know, traditional values like empathy or compassion are inherent signs of weakness, and that
oh,
they need to be those people who profess or exhibit them are themselves kinds of criminals. And it seems like we're slipping slowly further and further into a state of authoritarianism almost every day here. Um,
Absolutely, Paul. Uh, Look, the word weak and woke are so similar for a reason, because woke is synonymous with weakness, with a snowflake. These people portray themselves as very strong, and they people like Trump are attempting to criminalize solidarity. Literally, people who express solidarity with Palestine are being chucked out of the country, being labeled as anti-patriotic, which is the easiest label to come up with. So yeah, things in the U.S. aren't particularly good right now. Trump is a very dangerous man on many levels. And you have some wonderful people in there, Bernie Sanders, for instance, and he was a bit quiet in the first months of the genocide, but he's now being very, very vocal. Um, and I understand how difficult things can be in the US. Um, Incidentally, I'm preparing a third film on media bias. I want to call it a dirty media trilogy. So I had the Coup d'etat factory in Brazil,
Hmm.
the Bad Patriots in the UK, and I want to do one focus on the US slash the world. I conducted the penultimate interview with Noam Chomsky before, just 6 days before he had the stroke that left him unable to communicate, to write, and to speak. An hour and a half interview, a really, really, really good interview. So sweet that next day he sent me an email saying what a lift it was talking to you. Um, and the last interview he gave was to Piers Morgan, a very right-wing commentator in the UK. I doubt he sent the same email to Piers Morgan. But anyway, so I plan to use that in a third film, which provisionally called The Bad Jews, for talking to all the prominent Jews. Obviously, Noam Chomsky being a media expert, probably the biggest one in the world, makes a huge difference. But I asked Chomsky a question at the end of the interview. He said, Chomsky, I've talked to Ken, to Jeremy. You know Jeremy very well. You haven't met Ken, but anyway, really want to talk to Bernie Sanders. Would you be able to put me in touch with Bernie? You know what he said? Uh, s- don't, those are not exact words, but something to that effect. It's all recorded. Victor, I haven't been in touch with Bernie for 20 or 30 years because the people around him think I'm too toxic.
Oh,
So even someone like Bernie Sanders is discouraged, if not prohibited, from approaching someone like Noam Chomsky. Both of them, incidentally, are Jewish. Both of them are very critical of what the Zionist establishment is doing. So yeah, things are very different. Things are different in the US. Things are, yeah, the topics are a lot more sensitive and yeah, the UK is not a role model of democracy, is not a role model of free speech by any means whatsoever. We don't have a constitution. There's no guarantee of free speech. London is the libel capital of the world. People come here to sue others just because content landed on the internet and it was available in the UK. That's down. I mean, in the UK, in the US, you have a little bit of an attachment to free speech, which also backfires because people can say the most shocking and absurd things and get away with it. So, which model is better? I don't know. But what both countries have in common right now is that they are embracing a very, very, very rapidly xenophobic agenda, and people who have anything more progressive to say, who stand with the poor, the most marginalized, the LGBT, are immediately dismissed as woke.
it's a sad state of affairs here, Victor, as you've demonstrated. With that said, I'll just conclude by saying I hope that all my compatriots here stateside get the opportunity to see Bad Patriots at some point in the near future. I will wish you the very best with your screening in London tomorrow night, and look forward also to seeing that film with Chomsky in the future. You have a
Can I
last word.
can I
Absolutely.
just say to your American viewers, those who are not familiar with Ken Loach, Ken Loach is the of the working class. He has not done incredibly well in the US, which is something we discuss in my film. He's extremely well known in Europe, in Brazil, in Asia, you name it. And in the US, his films are not, anathema to capitalism and very, very critical of violence as well. So please do look out for Ken Loach. His films are incredibly powerful. If you're going to, before you look out for Bad Patriots, look out for Ken Loach. Again, he's the only British person to have won the Palme d'Or in Cannes twice. He's the person who's been in Cannes most times in history. He really does have a thing or two to say. So familiarize yourself with Ken Loach. Have a read about Jeremy Corbyn as well. And I think you'll be impressed with what you're about to find out. And once you're a little familiar with those, I'm sure you'll be compelled to see the Bad Patriots once it becomes available.
Thank you so much for your time today, Victor. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Paul. All the best to you. All right.
Thank you.
Cheers.